Hi, I'm Benton Stokes.
And I'm Elane O'Rourke.
And this is Cocktail Theology. Hi there.
Hi there.
How are you today?
I'm good. I get to see you.
Aww.
Aw, I know.
I'm good too.
I know. And it's been like 36 hours since I've seen you, so.
I know.
And so tell everybody what we did this weekend.
We went to Wild Goose this weekend. Mm-hmm. And Wild Goose, if you don't know, is a gathering of people from diverse backgrounds out in the mountains of North Carolina, a little tiny town called Hot Springs. People camp. Of course, we didn't camp because
we don't camp.
We don't do that.
We don't
and
camp.
If you want to hear more about that, just go back and listen to episode 2, where we were on the road trip to the Goat Cheese Creamery.
And we talked about how we don't camp.
Yeah, we didn't camp, but we did Airbnb, which was great. It really was interesting and inspiring to be a part of conversations and hear stories and testimonies of folks that are experiencing God, exploring God in new, exciting ways. So much of what I heard over the weekend resonated with a lot of the things that you and I talk about, what happens when you hit the wall and you come out on the other side. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the post-evangelicals, which I'm one of those, folks that move kind of from evangelical land into this space, were particularly interesting to me. People that have come around to a new view of God and how God loves, accepts, expresses God's self, communicates with humanity, all that stuff. So it was really, really fun to be a part of some of that and very enlightening. Some of the highlights for me, there was a conversation with John Pavlovitz and Jen Hatmaker, who is an author, speaker, comes out of Southern Baptist land and has had an enlightenment of sorts and a difficult road, frankly, for the last year or two, but has landed in a place where, I mean, the support and the rally around her was really neat to see. That was really cool. Really interesting panel with Schaeffer and Randall Balmer and Butler Bass and Brian McLaren, where they talked about how we got here, and here being our current political / religious right dominating climate in the country right now, how that happened.
And the particularly unholy alliance between evangelical Christian power structures and Republican power structures.
Yes.
And it's an unholy alliance because, at least in my view, and from everything I've seen ever, whenever empire and Christian walk align, Christian walk is destroyed because the desire for empire is just so strong. Hence the unholy alliance. And it would be an unholy alliance if it were the other direction as well. I mean, it's not about which political, it's about the fact of it. Yeah.
Right. And then there was good music. I met Trey Pearson. He was the lead singer for a Christian group called Everyday Sunday. Came out, and then, of course, everything that happens when that happens, because he was promptly ushered out of that world and has found a new niche expressing his faith and his truth through his music. And so it was really neat to hear him, and more than that, to talk to him. We met a lot of interesting people, didn't we?
We did. As you've been saying, the view from post-evangelical world upon going into Wild Goose is quite different than the view from my world, which is, as a Christian coming out of sort of far-left politics and what used to be the mainline church, the political aspects and the openness to difference, those are given. What's weird in that end of the church is Jesus having any actual power or God being active or any of those things. So, of course, my view coming in is more like, oh, okay, so you are a butch lesbian Christian. Okay, that's not interesting.
Right.
So that, I think that's what was interesting for both of us. And so as a result, the conversations are pretty wide conversation.
Thoroughly enjoyed the time.
Now, it's called Wild Goose. It is sometimes abbreviated as Goose. And I mentioned it the other day to someone saying that we had gone to the Goose. And they said, the Grey Goose? And I said, no, not the Grey Goose. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what Grey Goose is a kind of vodka. And we did not have any Grey Goose.
We had no Grey Goose.
We had no Grey Goose. But today we are having our pirate cocktail.
We are having a pirate cocktail. It's called the Anne Bonny.
It is called the Anne Bonny. It's a takeoff on a margarita. Mm-hmm. So it's rum and triple sec and fresh tangerine juice and fresh lime juice. And there it is.
And it's delicious.
And that's the cocktail of the day as we reflect back on Wild Goose. And on my favorite conversation at Wild Goose.
Yes.
So I got the chance to interview Doug Pagitt. And I first became aware of, all right, wait, I need to say this. I am such a fangirl. Okay, now I'm fine. So I became aware of Doug Pagitt around 2006. He was one of the founders of Emergent Village, which was a conversation site. And it was of folks interested in what was then called the Emergent Church movement or the missional church, depending upon whether your focus was worship and community or evangelism and service. But the idea was a rethinking of the way church was being done in the late 20th, early 21st century. And Doug is also the founding pastor of Solomon's Porch in Minneapolis. The way that Solomon's Porch operates is, first of all, they meet Sunday evenings intentionally. And instead of giving sermons, Doug facilitates conversation and participation. It's a very artsy community, but very interesting in that way. So I do not know this, but the feeling is that Doug was trying to get back to the early church, not in terms of a sense of, the early church was perfect, but the early church was communal and communicative.
Right.
So he wrote a book around 2005, I think, something like that documented the genesis and the operations of Solomon's Porch. The book itself was framed as a conversation among the members. So there were continuing sidebars from people who were actually members talking about Solomon's Porch and talking about art and talking about their own learning to be Christian and that kind of stuff. So it was fascinating. So really, along with Sally Morgenthaler and Brian McLaren, Doug was one of the primary influencers of my whole rethinking of church life when I was pastoring the turnaround church that I was pastoring. So
that's super cool.
Sometime not too long after that, I went to the National Pastors Convention, which, for those of you who don't know about the National Pastors Convention, it was or is a gathering of evangelical pastors to learn how to be better pastors, find out what's going on in the world, that kind of stuff. Anyway, so he was speaking. And the talk that I heard was, I think he called it, How Quantum Physics Saved My Faith.
Wow, that's cool.
Oh, my gosh. He was talking about how the big picture of God's eternity, God's universe, and the big picture of quantum physics were very similar. It was just marvelous. And then his wife, Shelley Pagitt, whom I really admire, she actually started and runs a place called Yoga Sanctuary in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And that's starting a training program, by the way. So if anybody out there is looking for a yoga teacher training program, really encourage you to contact Shelley at yogasanctuarymp.com, I think. Anyway, she was leading early morning yoga, but you couldn't call it yoga because it was National Pastors Convention.
Oh, wow.
Right? Yeah, it was crazy shit. So in more recent years, Doug's been involved with Convergence, which you remember we went to.
Yes.
It's a musical, I don't know what you call it, an organization looking to write music that is more open than evangelical CCM type music is. He's also a drive time AM talk show host in Minneapolis, and he's discussing theology and culture, drive time, AM. Love it.
That's
fantastic. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But here's why I wanted to interview Doug. Not too long ago, he founded the Greater Things Foundation. And the mission, I'm just going to read this directly to you because it's so useful. The mission of the Greater Things Foundation is this: we empower the human spirit and foster life-giving community for a more beautiful, inclusive, common good in faith and civic life.
Nice.
Love that. One of the major projects of the foundation is this thing called Vote Common Good. And that's why Doug was at Wild Goose, particularly this year, talking about it. And we'll touch on that, of course, in the interview. What Vote the Common Good is trying to do is to encourage evangelical congressional voters in swing districts to vote their conscience rather than their historic politics. And that means those who are coming into a new way of thinking about theology and community because of what's going on in the country right now.
Right.
They're historic Republican voters, but they're really not happy with the presidency. So they're going after those people who are really faith-filled voters who are now having to rethink what that looks like. They're going after people who are enraged about politics for the first time, that say, I need to think about this. And those who have been really involved with politics for a long time, and it's time to make a more perfect union. So anyway, I really wanted to talk to him about that because I'm so excited about what he's doing. And the journey from what I think of as Emergent Church all the way through to this, and how from the outside it looks like very different kinds of things, but from the inside, it's not so much different. So that's what we talked about. I was thrilled. Half an hour with Doug made me so very happy. So
this is Elane's conversation with Doug Pagitt.
So I started running 7 years ago, and when I started because I wanted to run ultras.
okay.
So running a 50-mile race was the plan when I started running. I've never thought of myself as a runner. Like, I didn't run, it wasn't a thing, there's nothing natural about it. My running gait is all wanky. Yeah, what's the word?
Bollocksed.
Great word. There's nothing natural about it. Okay. What fits me about running ultras is not that I'm a good runner, because ultras are not actually for good runners. They become ideal for really intense people.
Sure.
I don't think I come across as intense. Like, I'm affable, but there's a kind of intensity in there that is just like, I want to do really hard things.
Yes.
And challenge. I'm an Enneagram 8, and that's often called the challenger. And people think that it means you're going to challenge all systems. And I guess for some people it is. Yeah. The way it manifests in my life is I want a challenge. I'm enlivened by that. So the idea of running for 12 hours or 24 hours or 26 hours and having to do that and put that together, that just feels like a worthwhile project. Like, if I'm going to run, that's what I'm going to do.
That way of describing the going to the ultra, and that's where you started. I hate to say that sounds like a metaphor for the various pieces of your life over time, but I'm wondering whether not just the challenge, but the aiming for something bigger. Yeah. And the building up to the something bigger. If you're the kind of person who A, wants a challenge, and B, is looking at these long haul, dive in intense things, I mean, it actually kind of fits as a metaphor for the various things you've done.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. I mean, I'm glad about that, because it feels then like my running is not a break from my life. It's me being in my running the way I am in the rest of my life, which is what I want. For some people, their sport or their exercise or their activity allows them to leave the world they're in and be in another world. Someone asked me today about running. He runs marathons, and he asked about running ultramarathons. And he said, I just don't know if I could give that extra time. Like, do you then use that for your meditation? And it's a great question. People ask it all the time. There's a great book called What I Think About When I'm Running. Because that's the question people have.
Well, of course. What do you do?
Where does your mind go? What do you do? So they'll ask really roundabout and sometimes really specific questions. Do you listen to music? Do you listen to art? Yeah. My internal answer to him was, well, I don't use it as meditation. I use it as running. It's not a means to another end. It is me being me while running.
Yes.
It's not me trying to meditate and using running as a mechanism to get to that thing I can't get to.
How can one take a break from oneself?
I don't know, but people do it. They say, well, that's why I'm going to go on vacation, or some people get into gaming. So they kind of separate their lives into two pieces, and one is their life and one is their retreat from their life.
But that can turn into really kind of shadow self too. I mean, that can get really
100%
challenging.
Yeah, and I've been around a lot of religious people, and some people in religion use this kind of language, like, I like to be in worship because then I can see myself as I truly am before the Heavenly Father. And I'm like, oh, no, sweetie, see yourself as you truly are in the mirror. Like, don't go to this other fantasy place. Like, I get it, that, I mean, it might sound harsh to somebody for whom that's serving them right now, because their current day reality is really hard for them. But if that's your thing, bring that into the daily experience. Like, don't keep that as an exceptional place. make that the normative place.
Yeah, it's the mountaintop problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just move to the mountaintop for a while and
Yeah.
live there and stay there. Stop going up and down.
Right.
Like if you like that mountaintop experience,
Build the buildings.
build a place on a mountaintop.
Exactly.
At the end of every day, it's all about the peace we make with who we were and who we are and who we'll become somehow. We have now.
Like I think about what my professional and personal project has been around Christianity, the faith that I hold and am held within. I have ambitions to transform Christianity. Like that's borderline delusional. You're right. I mean, that's right at the edge of like, are you out of your mind? So the idea that something would be outrageous is what makes it interesting.
Right.
Is it possible? That's not the question I'm asking. It's a personality thing maybe or something else. I don't know. But I don't worry if someone's like, well, what if it doesn't work? I'm like, I'm much more worried, what if it does? Like that's a much bigger question. What if your thing you're setting out to do in the world, what if it happens? And I was worried about, I ran a 100-mile run a year and a half ago, and I was worried and have been worried since then. What will I be like after I do that thing and reach that goal that I've had for a long time? Is it going to be the sort of like now that the fire of that has gone out, like I've accomplished it and it's done? I don't know.
I was thinking as you were talking about the way Solomon's Porch, when it first kind of sort of being seen, to me anyway, looked like a physical instantiation of the way people were talking about community. So as you talk about community, you're talking about, you know, interactivity and everybody being in the living room and stuff, it really kind of seemed like you were trying to make that idea into a thing.
Yeah.
And that's a big project. Because it's not just about opening up a living room.
Right.
It's about creating an entire different culture and drawing on that. That reminds me of 50, 100-mile runs.
Yes, totally.
And as you've moved through and talked about, you know, the way you preach in a new world and how you think about these things, it makes total sense to me that at this point in your challenging, you're winding up looking to a political world. And what I mean by political is the way we interact in the polis, right? The sense that we are social creatures. I know you're trying to transform Christianity, but it also seems like you're trying to transform a particular subsection of humanity at the moment. I realize that was just a lot.
No, that's exactly the way I would have described it. It feels like a series of concentric circles is a metaphor that I'm using to think about that. In one sense, I've worked on my own spirituality and my own life and trying to integrate that in a way that is gracious to myself and to others, right? Yeah. And then I want that in my own relationships, and then another circle, I want that in a broader community, Christian community. And so I've spent time working on that level professionally in church work and in writing and in talking and trying to help people create a collective one anotherness in their Christian spirituality. Because I think it really matters, and I think part of the Christian story that has been so transformative to me in my own personal circle, and that internal circle, has been the narratives and the freedom alternatives that I find in the Christian story. So I'm highly cognizant of the fact that people experience Christianity differently than that.
Yes.
It hasn't been my experience, though. Christianity hasn't been bad for me.
Right.
I'm not sure I want to be a Christian in the sense of its total historic kind of sensibility, but without being overly picky like I am a lot of times with words, that I find myself as a follower of God in the way of Jesus. But that thing, that is called that Christian, that has not treated me badly. I've wanted to broaden that so that other people in the Christian community could experience that. That's been good work for me, and it's felt good, and I've wanted to do that. And those lessons are not different from where I see the political environment currently in the United States. And I think we are in a time that is abnormal. And I don't mean that America now doesn't work for people and it used to. America hasn't worked for a lot of people for a very long time. And that's something that all of us need to dedicate our lives to addressing and changing. But what's happened with the current Republican Party, and not just with Donald Trump, but really from the 2004, 2002 forward, the Tea Party and the Libertarian movement, and a fracturing of the collective identity of Republicanism has now manifest itself in a president who I think, and I try to say this as often as I can, who I believe as a person is the light of the world and the salt of the earth and the beloved of God, and everything that's granted to a human being in all fullness of grace and total acceptance of God is available for Donald Trump. But he is totally unqualified and unfit to be in the role of the President of the United States.
Right.
And that unfitness is damaging people in the country.
Yes.
And so I take it very personally, not because I'm personally offended that he's the president, but I take it personally because people are personally being harmed by the policies, and the planet is being harmed by his actions. Our system anticipated a president like this. The founders anticipated a president. What they didn't anticipate was a feckless Congress that would allow this to happen. So that's why we're trying to flip Congress in this current window, because they're not capable, because they've given themselves over to a Trumpism. And this is where the religious narrative and the political narrative collide, because it's many religiously oriented people and using religiously oriented arguments that are so supportive of Donald Trump. So that same work of trying to work in community that is gracious and accepting and inclusive is what needs to happen in the political sphere, and it turns out that it's often religious people who are preventing that from happening. So in some ways it feels like it's doing the similar kind of work for a larger consequence, which is that larger circle.
Right.
And I think churches are part of the collective life too, and Christian communities and Jewish synagogues and mosques and yoga centers and Buddhist meditation temples. And they're all part of us. So it's not like you can say, well, there's the religious life and then there's the political life. Like the political life is made up of all the things, not some of the things. And some of the things of all the things don't want to participate as much. They're glad to have the other things form the collectiveness.
Right. Which is true in any large institution.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what humans do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't participate in most of the things that are super important in the world, just to be frank.
You can't.
Yeah. I am so impressed by and so grateful for and such a beneficiary of the sophisticated sanitation system in the United States that is provided for the kind of health that's unthinkable. And I know nothing about it and don't think about it and don't care about it. And I mean, I think more about well water in other parts of the world than I do, other than Flint, Michigan. I don't even think about the water coming out of the tap. Right. I just think, is that filtered or not? Because I'm picky. So anyway, I get it that people could benefit from something, live in it. It's super important. And they don't think about it at all. So a lot of people don't think about the political life like that. So I do, and I've always cared about it. And I've cared about it like a hobby. You know, I mean, I've been just interested in politics. I would, for years. Solomon's Porch meets on Sunday nights, so I have my Sunday mornings free. And, I watch news programs for fun. I mean, I watch it like people watch sports programs. Like I'm a total political entertainment nerd. I love that stuff. I follow congressional people, and I like policy stuff. And so when those things that I care a lot about, know a lot about, politics and religion, are now consorting in a particular way, it's just like, okay, I'm going to be part of this. And then I have this like history and life and kind of connections that feel like they could be in service in this way. Yeah. So we formed Vote Common Good out of those impulses of mine and a bunch of impulses of others into an effort to, in 2018, barnstorm the country and try to flip Congress. Right. I could imagine a time when we're trying to flip Congress to being more nonpartisan. I could imagine a time where we would have to flip Congress out of the control of Democrats because they've lost the way of the common good. Right. That's not our problem right now, though. That's not what's happening right now. So I don't want to have a conversation about nonpartisanship and listening to each other, because that's not, the house is burning down. That is just not the issue we're dealing with right now. The right now-ness is the Republicans are complicit in damaging children, adults, the spirit and the Constitution of the United States and our alliances around the world, and it needs to stop. Yes. And our system is, there's 3 equal branches of government, and the peoples decide if the people in those roles are performing their duties as they should, and it's clear to me that they're not, so we should change it. And to say that boldly and bluntly, it's shocking how much that's met with, well, why are you being so partisan? Like, well, because that's what it calls for right now.
Right.
This is an effort that both, I think Christianity and the way the United States is structured, both of them in their ideal form, is an of the people, by the people, for the people movement. Mm-hmm. So we organize ourselves with representatives in a government, and when they don't work, we should advocate.
Do something about it.
Do something about it. My friend Tessa said the other day she was raised in a family where, in the 80s, where they were highly engaged in social issues, like apartheid and immigration issues in the United States and all kinds of really high-level homelessness. She now realizes, like, I was in a really political family, and my mom used to say, well, honey, when you live in a time where there's big social issues, you don't do nothing, you do something. And I've just loved that phrase, you don't do nothing.
That's good.
This is my something.
This is your not
right?
doing nothing.
Yeah, this is my this is how I'm not doing nothing.
Yeah.
So we're trying to invoke religious voters who have reflexively, habitually voted Republican in the past and realize by their conscience and their faith they shouldn't or can't do that any longer.
Right.
And want to give them the encouragement to either vote common good or to vote maybe for the first time, to offer their vote to other people.
Right.
On behalf of other people, kind of a charity vote.
It's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
I was thinking, I have many, many thoughts. There was a book written by a guy at the Brookings Institute some time ago, and I'm not going to remember his name, where he documented how from the time that the moral majority was founded up through, I want to say 2000 or so, that the Republican strategy, straight up strategy, was to make people distrust the federal government. Mm-hmm. Because when they distrust the federal government, they vote Republican, just historically. That as a lead up to what happened, you know. But it makes me think about just that language of the common good.
Yeah.
That if we ever had a sense of the common good, I'm not sure that that's a living ideal for people anymore. Mm-hmm. Two things, I guess. One is, how do you help people think about that? Because they've never thought about it. And the other one being, how do you talk to people who come out of church environments of a very strong, probably slightly abusive pastor, which then makes them very comfortable with a very strong abusive president or a very strong abusive spouse, or, you know, how do you help that shift? Because that seems to me a tremendous amount of internal work separate from seeing the common good. So I'm just kind of wondering, because you're so not this guy, that it's got to be an interesting problem.
So that first thought there, I think that the way we do this to get people to think about the common good is similar to the, I guess, our running conversation from a few minutes ago, because if what I'm trying to do when I'm running is not, and I mean physically running, not running for office, not yet, it's not 2024
well,
yet,
no.
which is the year of my election. That what I'm doing when I'm running is doing my life in the running context, not something else. So the way you get people to consider the common good when they think about the polis or their voting is to find those places where they think about the common good in other areas. So there's a lot of, like, conservatives, there's a lot of bleeding heart conservatives who give a lot of money to causes. They think about other people, they're engaged in food banks, they're helping the poor, they're thoughtful around the world, they're doing a lot of things. But then it comes to their voting and all of a sudden they become what's in it for me. So asking them to consider those for whom the government and country is not working very well right now and to offer it on behalf of them, that's how you get them to do it. You don't give them a new concept, you show them how they're already doing it. And that's true for all of us, right? The most life change comes when we recognize something true in ourselves that then we want to have in other parts of our lives or want it to develop even more greatly, as opposed to insert something that doesn't exist in you.
Right.
And this is where some of the political analysis I don't think is very helpful, because it basically wants to say, well, there's some people who vote their own interest and some people who vote other people's interests and yada, yada, yada like that.
Yeah.
And I think, no, we all care about our own interests too often, and we all care about other people sometimes, and we want to make that second one a little bit more and the first one a little bit less, and that's kind of what you're doing. And so I think it really matches well with what's already happening in people's lives. This idea about the abusive leader in churches, I think is right. That's what I've seen. And curiously, on the other side, let's say what we saw with Obama, or I was a big Hillary Clinton supporter, we even saw with Hillary, was the celebrity leader.
Yes.
And there's a whole part of our culture that's had an abusive leader or a celebrity leader that they kind of want to aspire to be like.
Yes.
They both have their own kind of pain to them and their own kind of struggle. So what's kind of happened is people who didn't find Obama or didn't find Hillary Clinton to be the sort of person that they wanted to aspire to. They felt left out. So now it's kind of their time. And I hear my friends say this all the time. Well, they'll say like, oh, I just long for the day when there was when we could be proud of the president. And I get that. I was a big Obama supporter, I was, you know, I was in on a whole lot of it. But I got to tell you, that sort of Obama worship thing that was going on.
It's been fascinating to watch it.
It's not good for the democracy. I'm not making moral equivalency between that and the abject destruction of the Trump administration.
Sure.
That's full stop. The way that people have treated Obama as some sort of celebrity, fashion, personal icon has its own way of taking power from people.
Absolutely.
Who don't feel like that.
I think JFK is a similar example.
Oh, yeah, great.
Right?
Yeah, very much that way. You kind of want to look up to the president and then realize it's it's what we do to presidents after they're done being president.
Yes.
We sort of look at him and go like, that was really hard. And I guess a guy like you did the best you could.
Right.
And it wasn't all that great, and there was a whole lot more we should have done, but you know, we get it. And then the person that's in office, we either demagogue or idolize in some weird way. Like we have to get to a more normalcy. And the conservatives used to be the people pushing that narrative about the imperial president and the, you know, King Obama and all this. And what they were critiquing and tapping into is this sense, not only how he's functioning politically, but just how he's being exalted all the time as some sort of Obama godhead. And a lot of us haven't learned that lesson yet. That hasn't been, what people are doing is they just want to return to that. You know, they want to return to that.
But my godhead.
Yeah, that enslavement rather than the enslavement we're in now. And I like to call people to a kind of, I don't know, something else.
To do this right, to be somebody's life. We've only got this time to forgive and heal what's broken. Bring the hope out in the open. 'Cause at the end of every
A little campaign I was whipping up before this Vote Common Good came on was something a little more tongue-in-cheek, and it's called Run for President. Because you can register to run for president for free on a federal website. Getting on the ballot in every state is really, really hard. But I think everyone should say, I'm running for president in every election. And then you decide, oh, I can't run, so I'm going to throw my support behind this person. But you do that as a fellow candidate.
Right.
So you try to equalize the voter with the candidate by saying, I could be that person. Because if you keep doing this thing like there's certain special people is how you get into the demagogue and the king. That's not what we should have. So it's like at Solomon's Porch, we don't, in our spiritual community there, people get treated the same. There's no ordination or anything. Right. And somebody said, oh, so you guys are trying to get rid of the notion of the clergy. And I said, no, I think we're trying to get rid of the notion of laity.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of the same thing with the two approaches.
It's very different.
So trying to call people, I don't want to get rid of the level of the presidency, but I do want to call people up to the fact that like, hey, you should treat this like something that really matters, you should care, and also don't overplay this thing and realize that this is one of the people in the of the people, for the people, by the people approach, and one of our people is doing this role, and one of our people is a representative, and one is a senator, and one is a judge, but this is all us.
Sounds very body of Christ.
Yeah, see, that's the thing that it's that same perspective, trying to think about those. So anyway.
Yeah. So you're barnstorming this fall.
Yep.
Can you say a couple words about that and then how people can get involved?
46 congressional districts that we think are the most flippable is where we're traveling to. In order to do that, they're spread across 25 states. I mean, we'll travel 16,000 miles in a caravan with a merry band of Vote Common do-gooders.
Okay.
And so we're inviting people to be in the caravan with us for a week or a day or a month or 2 months. It's September 6th to November 6th. And we're running events in each of these districts and inviting people to come out. So there's a very on-the-ground local thing. We're trying to actually impact these races. Okay. We're also trying to, at the same time, infuse and influence both the religious system and the political system to allow religious voters who can't seem to vote Republican any longer to vote for the common good or even vote for a Democrat, and for the Democratic Party to become more open and receptive of religious voters, because that divide is too strong. It's really a problem.
Yeah.
Just shoving people away for no good reason. I mean, these candidates would gladly never say that they choose one of the professional sports teams in their town as their favorite over another in their town because they don't want to alienate anyone, but they'll gladly just write off religious people.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So we're kind of working both those angles. So votecommongood.com is the website with the map and where you can sign up. And we're raising big money, and so we need it, and we need lots of it, and would love for people to donate. We need organizers on the ground in all these cities, and then we need people online helping to spread this word. So our little phrase is, we'd love to see you on the road, we'd love to see you on the ground at our event, we'd love to see you online, and of course in the voting booth on November 6th, and to vote common good. So we're helping Republican historied voters to maybe consider writing in common good instead of voting for their typical candidate. If you think 2 points, a 2-point swing happens in voting when you go from voting from one party to voting for the other party.
Yeah.
So you took one away from this line and you put one in this line, so that's 2 points.
Yep.
A 1-point swing is great too.
Yeah.
In other words, if somebody voted for Republican in the past and will write in common good this time, that takes a vote. Or if someone who's a newly enraged voter and hasn't sat out previous elections now decides to vote, then you've added in a vote. So either of those ways to get a point or to get 2 points, we would count as a win.
That's great. So votecommongood.com.
But you can type in any of the dots and you'll end up at .com. It'll send you
get
there.
all of them. Any final words on this?
Feels good to me.
Good.
Yeah, thanks.
No,
and congratulations
thank you.
on the podcast.
Thanks.
Big fan.
Thank you. You're very sweet. All right, thanks.
We close our eyes at night. It's knowing we will be alright with who we were and who we are and who we'll become somehow. We have now.
So that was my interview with Doug Pagitt.
So good.
I loved it.
Doug needs a few more things to do, doesn't he?
Yeah, he doesn't do much. He's just kind of lying around eating peeled grapes. I mean, well, you remember when we ran into him before the interview, you know, he was saying he keeps saying he's not going to come back to Wild Goose, but he's back every year.
He's back every year.
Yeah, he needs more to do. So if you guys have something for Doug Pagitt to do, please contact him at dougpagitt.com. And let him know that he really needs more to do. So what stood out to you about all of
I loved when you guys were talking about his marathoning.
Ultramarathoning.
Ultramarathoning, let's be specific. Ultramarathoning, which to me is beyond, like, I do well to like walk places, let alone like work up a sweat, and he runs like 100 miles. I can't even, driving 100 miles, I get tired. So that, and then sort of the parallel that you drew between sort of the marathoning and the putting his head in the run as opposed to escaping his life in the run, and how that sort of parallels with a lot of the work that he's been doing was really, really interesting to me. And then, of course, I love his take and perspective on current American politics. I just think it's incredibly insightful. He's impassioned about it, but he's not angry about it. And it's really refreshing to hear someone clear-headed who has clearly analyzed everything that's going on in the country, has gotten to the bottom of why so many of us feel the way we feel right now, and has been able to verbalize, here's why we need a change, and here's how we get a change. Will you help me?
Yep.
And I think that's really, really helpful.
Right.
Language to use, particularly when you're talking to folks that are pretty entrenched in their voting habits and the way that they traditionally see the world and who they trust to telegraph to them what they need and how they need to vote.
Yeah, the part about ultramarathoning, that connection between going for a goal that you know is going to take a long time and that it is just a long road it just seemed to me to be such a perfect metaphor for the wanting to change the church, wanting to change the world stuff.
Yeah.
So, I really loved that as well. If you want to go find out more about Doug Pagitt, you can look him up at Solomon's Porch in Minneapolis, or you can look up dougpagitt.com or votecommongood.com or greaterthingsfoundation.com, any of those things. Or just, Google him. He's everywhere. And if you want to find out more about us, you can always go to schoolforseekers.com.
Yes, you can.
To support us, you can go to our Patreon website, which is patreon.com/cocktail theology. And to be clear, that not only supports this podcast, but also supports the work we do through School for Seekers, including things like going to Wild Goose, meeting people, talking to them, and learning their stories and hearing about their journeys. So we want to hear more about your journey as well. So please, if you are on our cocktailtheology.com website, please write in the comments. Email us at info@schoolforseekers.com. Follow us on Facebook. We are basically all over the place.
We are.
Can't help but find us. But we would really love to hear from you, and particularly from you about anything that you would like us to talk about, that you want to hear thought through out loud, so that you can think through out loud what matters to you.
Well put.
Thank you very much.
I like that.
I'm going to go back to the Anne Bonny.
I'm going to also enjoy my Anne Bonny. So thanks everybody for listening. We throw up new episodes every Thursday. So please subscribe, tell your friends. It helps others find us when you subscribe, because our numbers go up, and then Google says, oh, look
There
who's
they
there.
are. It's them.
They drink cocktails and they talk about important things. We love them. Bump us up on the list when people search for
I like
podcasts.
that. All right, friend.
All right, friend.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.